My father and brother used my car as theirs for years and destroyed it. I bought a camper to escape, but my father tried to steal it. So I installed GPS, caught him on video, and called the police. Now he's arrested and I'm living free on the road while they're left broken. I'm 28 years old. I work in construction. And I need to tell this story because I literally just left my entire family behind and started a completely new life on the road. And I still can't believe things got to where they got. I guess I should start from the beginning, or at least from the point where everything started going to shit for real, which was like 3 years ago when I turned 25 and my father, Stanley, decided that my '98 Honda Accord was basically public property for him and my brother, Justin. I grew up in a small town, one of those where everybody knows everybody, and your options are working construction, working at the factory, or getting the hell out. My mother, Angela, was always one of those people who avoid conflict at all costs. Like her favorite phrase was, "That's just how your father is," or, "You know how Justin is," as if that was a valid excuse for anything. My father, Stanley, on the other hand, always had this super weird mentality that everything in the house was his. Didn't matter who bought it. And Justin, my brother, who's 3 years older than me, was basically a miniature version of my father, but with this smug smile that made me want to pull my hair out. The thing is, I worked hard. I mean, really hard. From age 16, I was working construction on weekends and after school, saving every penny I could because I knew I needed to get out of there eventually. When I was 23, I bought that '98 Honda Accord. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I paid for it with my money. I had the papers in my name and everything. It was silver, had like 180,000 miles, but the engine ran fine, and it was my way to get to work every day because construction sites changed constantly and I needed mobility. It all started when Justin totaled his truck. I think it was in February 2022. He crashed into a pole because he was texting or something. Anyway, the truck was completely wrecked, and my father told him, "Use Dylan's car in the meantime." They didn't even ask. Me. You know what I mean? One day I came home from work and my car wasn't there. I called my mom and she said, "Oh yeah, Justin needed it to go to work." And I was like, "And how am I supposed to get to work tomorrow?" And she told me Justin would return it to me at night. Well, Justin returned it at night, but with an empty tank, trash in the back seat, and a new dent in the rear bumper. I complained to him, and he just shrugged and said it was an accident. Relax. My father was there, and when I tried to complain, he told me to stop being so selfish, that family helps each other. And that was the first time I realized this was going to be a big problem. From then on, it became routine. Justin took my car whenever he wanted, sometimes without even telling me. I'd come home from work and my car wasn't there, or I'd wake up in the morning and the keys weren't where I'd left them. Sometimes Stanley would take it too. He'd say he needed to go to Home Depot or the hardware store or some bullshit like that. And if I protested, he'd tell me that as long as I lived under his roof, things worked the way he said. The worst part is they'd always return it with less gas, dirty, sometimes with broken things. One time, Justin broke the side mirror and didn't even tell me. I found out when I went to leave for work. I tried talking to my mom several times. Like, "Mom, this isn't right. It's my car. I paid for it. I need to know. I'm going to have transportation to get to work." And she'd always go with the same thing. "You know how your father is. Justin only needs it temporarily until he gets another car. Don't make drama." But months went by and Justin never got another car. Why would he if he had mine available for free? The straw that broke the camel's back was in July of that year. I got home from work on a Friday around 6 in the evening, exhausted as hell because we'd been installing drywall all day in horrible heat, and my car wasn't there. I called Justin, and he sent me straight to voicemail. I called my dad, and he told me Justin had taken the car for the weekend because he was going fishing with some friends at a lake like 3 hours away. I froze. Like, are you telling me he took my car for the whole weekend without asking me? And my dad got mad and told me to stop crying like a little girl, that it was just one weekend. On Monday, Justin came back with my car, and it literally looked like it had been through a war zone. Covered in mud everywhere, the interior smelled like beer and fish. There were empty cans on the floor, and when I checked the engine, the oil was super low, and the air filter was destroyed. They'd taken it on really shitty dirt roads and hadn't done any maintenance afterward. I complained to him and he laughed, told me not to be dramatic, that it was just a little mud. That's when I exploded. I told them they couldn't keep using my car, that it was mine, that I needed the keys back immediately. Stanley stood up, you know, using that physical intimidation technique he always used where he gets real close to you to make you feel small, and told me that as long as I lived in his house, he decided how things worked, and if I didn't like it, I could leave. Justin was there with that shit-eating grin he always had, like enjoying the show. That night, I hid my car keys in my work backpack, thinking that at least they'd have to ask me for them. The next morning, I woke up, and the keys weren't in my backpack. They'd taken them out while I slept. I went downstairs and my car wasn't there. Stanley had taken it to go who knows where. I had to Uber to work. Cost me like $25. I hadn't planned to spend. After that, I tried to carry the keys with me all the time. I even slept with them in my pajama pocket. But one day, Stanley just made copies of the keys. I came home from work and he was leaving in my car, and when I complained about how he'd gotten the keys, he told me he'd gone to the hardware store and made copies. That it was real. Easy. I felt completely powerless. Things escalated horribly in August. Justin was driving my car, probably drunk because it was like 11 at night on a Saturday, and the police stopped him. Turned out he had some unpaid traffic tickets and a minor arrest warrant. I don't know all the details, but they arrested him right there. My car was left parked on the street and I had to go pick it up at like 2 in the morning. The police asked me why Justin was driving my car and I didn't even know what to say. I looked like an idiot. The next day, I had a horrible fight with my dad. I told him this was too much, that because of them, my car had almost been confiscated, that Justin could have had an accident, and I would have been responsible because the car was in my name. Stanley yelled at me that I was ungrateful, that he'd given me roof and food my whole life, and the least I could do was share my things with the family. I yelled back that the car was mine, that I had paid for it, that it wasn't the family's. And then he said something I'll never forget. He told me, "As long as you live in my house, everything you have is mine too, because I allow you to have it." That's when I knew I had to get out of that house, no matter what. The problem was that with my salary, I could barely save, because apart from spending on gas that they consumed, I had to pay for car insurance, my cell phone, my food when I was at work. Apartments in town were expensive for how shitty they were. Like they asked for first month, last month, and deposit. We're talking about like $2,500 I didn't have. It was in September when I had a conversation with my cousin Samuel at a family gathering. Samuel was like 35 and was a contractor, doing pretty well for himself, and he'd always been cool with me. I told him what was happening. Not all the details, but enough for him to understand the situation. He told me he'd seen a fifth-wheel camper for sale, a 2001 Keystone Cougar, the guy who had a farm was, selling it for $3,000 because he needed the space. Samuel told me if I bought it, he'd let me park it on his property for free. He had like 20 acres on the outskirts of town and plenty of space. The idea seemed perfect to me. I spent the next 2 months saving every penny I could. Worked extra shifts, skipped meals, didn't spend on absolutely anything that wasn't essential. By November, I had the $3,000. I went with Samuel to see the camper and it was in good condition. Considering the price, it needed some cleaning and minor maintenance, but it was completely functional. Had a bathroom, small kitchen, a sleeping area, everything I needed. I bought it without telling my family anything. The guy helped me tow it. Well, he had a friend with a pickup who could do it, and we took it straight to Samuel's property. Samuel helped me set it up. We connected water and electricity from his house, which was like 100 meters away. And in 2 days, I already had my own space. It wasn't much, but it was mine, completely mine, and nobody could take it from me. When I told my family I was moving out, my dad laughed in my face. He told me I wouldn't last even a week living in an old camper, that I'd come crawling back as soon as it got cold. My mom was worried, but in that passive way she always had. Like, "Oh, Dylan, are you sure? Are you going to be okay?" Without really supporting me or stopping me. Justin just said something like, "Good luck with that, idiot." I moved on a Saturday in mid-November. I didn't have many things anyway. Most of my belongings fit in my car in 2 trips. Samuel and his wife helped me clean the camper thoroughly and make it a bit cozier. His wife even gave me some curtains and sheets they weren't using anymore. The first night sleeping there, I felt incredible. I mean, it was cold because the heating system wasn't the best, but I didn't care. It was my space, and nobody was going to come in without my permission. I lived there for like 3 weeks, without my family bothering me. I went to work every day, came back to my camper, cooked simple things, read, watched stuff on my laptop. It was peaceful. Samuel would stop by sometimes to see how I was doing. His property was kind of remote, so it was also quiet. You could only hear the birds and the wind. Everything changed in early December. Stanley called me one day and told me he and Justin needed my camper to go on a week-long hunting trip. I told him no, that the camper was my home, that I couldn't just lend it to them. He got angry. Started with the same old speech about family and sharing, and I hung up on him. He called like 5 more times that day, left increasingly angry voicemails. Then my mom called, crying, saying to please lend them the camper because Stanley was very angry with me and this was going to cause problems in the family. I explained to her that it was my home, that I couldn't just lend it to them like that. Where was I going to live in the meantime? She said I could stay in my old room for that week. I told her no, that I didn't live there anymore and wasn't planning to go back. Then Justin called, but he was more direct. He told me that whatever my problems with Dad were, this had nothing to do with it, that they just needed the camper for a week for their hunting trip. I asked him, why didn't they rent one, and he told me why would they spend money if I had one. I told him no again, and he hung up on me too. Over the next few days, I received calls and messages from several family members, uncles, aunts, even my grandmother, all telling me to stop being difficult, that it was just 1 week, that family helps each other. It was like Stanley had called everyone to pressure me. The only person who supported me was Abigail, another cousin around my age, who sent me a message saying what they were asking of me was ridiculous and to stay strong. One night, must have been like Tuesday or Wednesday of that week, like 2 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of an engine and lights outside the camper. I looked out and it was Stanley's pickup hooking up my camper to his trailer hitch. I put on my shoes as fast as I could and ran out, yelling at them what the fuck were they doing. Stanley and Justin were there, trying to connect the camper to the pickup. I yelled at them to stop, that this was literally theft. Stanley told me they were taking it anyway, that I was going to learn to be less selfish. I started recording with my phone, and that stopped them for a second. Justin told me to stop being dramatic. Then the lights from Samuel's house turned on. He'd heard the noise, and he came out with a shotgun. He didn't point it at anyone or anything, but having it there changed the whole dynamic. Samuel told them to get off his property immediately, or he was going to call the police. Stanley started yelling that Samuel had nothing to do with this, that this was family business. Samuel told him this was his private property and he had exactly 30 seconds to disconnect the camper and leave. Stanley kept yelling, but Justin was already disconnecting everything. I think he got scared of the shotgun. They left throwing dirt with their tires, yelling threats. After that, Samuel told me I had to take serious measures. The next day, we went together to an electronics store, and I bought a GPS tracker that hid in the camper, and I also installed motion sensors connected to my phone that alerted me if anyone got too close. Samuel also put up security cameras pointing toward where the camper was parked. I spent like $400 on all that, but it was worth it for peace of mind. The threats continued through messages and calls for days. My mom cried every time she talked to me, saying I was destroying the family. I told her I wasn't destroying anything, that I was simply establishing boundaries with my things, but she didn't understand it or didn't want to understand it. Christmas came, and obviously, I didn't want to go to my parents' house, but Abigail convinced me to go to a family barbecue at my uncle's house in mid-December, before Christmas proper. She promised me she was going to be there and wouldn't let Stanley get too heavy. I went, mainly because I wanted to see other cousins and family members who I did like and had nothing to do with this drama. It was awkward from the moment I arrived. Stanley completely ignored me, didn't even say hello. Justin didn't talk to me either. My mom hugged me, but it felt forced, like obligation more than real affection. The rest of the family was nice, but you could feel the tension in the air. Everyone knew there were problems. Halfway through the barbecue, Stanley started drinking beers and got more talkative. At some point, I think when we were eating, He started making passive-aggressive comments about selfish people who forget where they come from and ungrateful children who deny help to their family. He wasn't looking at me directly, but it was obvious I was talking about me. I tried to ignore it, kept eating and talking with Abigail and other cousins. But then Justin joined in and said something like, "Yeah, Dad, there are people who prefer to live in a shitty camper than help their own family." And there, several family members laughed. I don't know if it was because it was uncomfortable or because they actually thought it was funny. I felt my blood boiling, but I stayed quiet, didn't want to make a scene. Then Stanley said really loud, so everyone could hear, that he didn't understand how someone could be so selfish with their own blood, that when he was young he shared everything with his family, that values were being lost. And there, Abigail exploded. She stood up from the table and told Stanley to stop playing the victim, that everyone knew he and Justin had been abusing Dylan's things for years, that they had literally tried to steal his camper in the middle of the night, and that if anyone was selfish and a bad father, it was him. The silence that fell was brutal, like you could hear a pin drop. Stanley's face turned red. He started yelling about how dare she disrespect him, that she was a stupid girl who didn't know anything. But Abigail didn't let herself be intimidated. She kept talking, told everyone present exactly what had happened, how Stanley and Justin had used and abused my car, how they'd tried to steal the camper, how they'd pressured the whole family to force me to lend it to them. Several family members didn't know all the details and looked shocked. My uncle, the homeowner, told Stanley to calm down and that maybe they should all talk about this calmly. But Stanley didn't calm down. He grabbed Justin and they left, yelling that this family was shit and he didn't want anything to do with any of us anymore. My mom went after them crying. I stayed there not knowing what to do, feeling horrible because I didn't want to ruin the family gathering, but also grateful to Abigail for defending me. After, they left. Several family members came up to me and apologized, said they didn't know things were that bad, that they understood why I'd established those boundaries. My uncle told me I always knew Stanley was controlling, but I didn't think he'd go that far. It was validating, honestly, to feel like I wasn't crazy, that what I was asking for wasn't ridiculous. The next few months were calmer. I spent Christmas and New Year's with Samuel and his family. It was nice. I didn't talk to my mom, Stanley, or Justin during that time. I kept working, kept living in my camper. It was a simple life, but it was mine. Winter was tough. The camper was hard to heat when it got really cold, but I managed with electric heaters and lots of blankets. In March, I got a job on a construction project that was going to last like 3 months, in a city about 4 hours away. The pay was good, so I accepted. The plan was to stay there during the week in a cheap motel and come back on weekends. I let Samuel know, gave him an extra key to the camper in case he needed anything, and I left. I was there for like 2 weeks, only coming back on weekends. The third weekend I came back, Friday night. I arrived at Samuel's property, and my camper wasn't there. I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. I called Samuel immediately. He didn't know anything. Told me when he'd passed by in the morning the camper was still there. I checked the GPS tracker app and there it was, moving on the main highway, going in the direction of my parents' house. I called the police immediately and explained the situation to them, that my camper had been stolen and I knew exactly where it was because I had GPS. They told me they'd send a patrol. Samuel and I got in his pickup and went after the GPS. The signal stopped at Stanley's house entrance. When we got there, my camper was there, parked in the driveway, with Stanley and Justin trying to disconnect it from Stanley's pickup. We arrived like at the same time as the police. The officers asked Stanley to identify himself and explain what he was doing with the camper. Stanley started with his story that it was his son, that he'd helped buy it. Pure lies. I showed my papers proving the camper was in my name, showed the video from the time they'd tried to steal it before, showed the GPS tracker and its history. The officers asked Stanley for documentation, proving the camper was his or that he had permission to move it. Stanley had nothing. My mom came out of the house crying, yelling that this was ridiculous. Why were we involving the police in family matters? One of the officers explained to her, very politely, that this wasn't a family matter but property theft. Justin was trying to sneak away toward the house, but the other officer told him to stay there. Stanley was arrested right there. They put handcuffs on him while he yelled that I was going to regret it, that I was destroying my own family, that I was a piece of shit. My mom was crying, hysterically, hugging Justin, yelling at me. How could I do this to my father? I felt terrible, but I also knew I'd done the right thing. The officers asked me if I wanted to press charges, and I said yes. One of them helped me hook the camper to Samuel's pickup to take it back. Before we left, my mom came up to me, no longer yelling but crying quietly, and told me how could I be so cruel. That Stanley was my father and now he was going to have a criminal record because of me. I told her it wasn't because of me, it was because of his decisions, that he had decided to rob me, that he had decided not to respect my things or my boundaries. She just shook her head and went back to the house. The legal process was long and draining. Stanley had to hire a lawyer. They went to court several times. My mom and Justin testified in his favor, obviously, but the evidence was all on my side. The video, the GPS, the threatening messages, everything. In the end, Stanley pleaded guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. I think it was a fine of like $2,000, restitution of another $500 to cover damages and my legal expenses, and probation for a year. They also put a temporary restraining order on him, prohibiting him from approaching me or my property. After all, that the relationship with my family was basically destroyed. I haven't talked to Stanley since then, and I don't intend to. I talked to my mom a couple of times, but it always ended up being the same thing. Her crying and telling me I should forgive, that family is family. I told her when she was ready to admit that Stanley had been wrong all these years, we could talk. But until then, I had nothing more to say to her. Justin sent me some messages with insults, but eventually I blocked him. The weird thing is, several other family members reached out to me after all this. Abigail obviously kept supporting me, became one of my best friends. Other cousins told me they respected that I'd asked and defended my boundaries. My uncle offered me work on some projects. It was like by finally standing up for myself. Some people saw I wasn't crazy, that I really had been enduring abuse for years. Samuel and I became closer during this whole process. We'd spend time together on weekends. He helped me make repairs to the camper, taught me carpentry and plumbing things I didn't know. At some point, he told me he was proud of me for not letting myself be walked over, that he'd seen how Stanley treated people for years and was glad someone had finally stood up to him. Over the following months, I started thinking more about my future. Living in the camper had been a temporary solution that became more permanent. But now that I had this complete freedom, this life without ties, I started wondering what else I could do. I'd been in construction for 10 years now. I was good at what I did. I had savings for the first time in my life because I didn't have to be subsidizing Stanley and Justin's life. I started researching about living on the road, like full-time, traveling from city to city, taking temporary jobs. There were entire communities of people who did it. Construction workers, contractors, people who just didn't want to be tied to one place. The more I researched, the more I liked the idea. By July of this year, I'd made the decision. I told Samuel I was going to leave, that I was going to try this traveling lifestyle for at least a year. He understood completely, told me he'd seen it coming, that he'd noticed how I talked more and more about mobility and freedom. He helped me prepare the camper for long trips. We installed solar panels on the roof so I wouldn't depend so much on electrical connections. Got a bigger water tank, fixed the heating system to make it more efficient. I made minor but important modifications, bought portable tools, organized everything so it would be functional for life on the move. Samuel connected me with some contractors he knew in other states who always needed good temporary workers. I made profiles on several remote work apps for construction and maintenance. Last week I said, goodbye. It was bittersweet, honestly. Samuel and his family had a small barbecue, invited Abigail and other cousins. It was nice. Everyone wished me luck, made me promise I'd keep them updated, that I'd visit when I passed through the area. Samuel gave me a long hug and told me I'd always have a place to park the camper if I needed it. Now I'm literally on the road, writing this from an RV park somewhere in North Carolina, like second week of travel. I already got my first job here. A renovation project for an apartment complex that's going to last like 2 months. The pay is good. The place is nice. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I really control my own destiny. Do I feel bad about how things ended with my family? I don't know. It's complicated. part of me still hopes my mom will call someday and admit that Stanley was wrong, that she should have defended my boundaries. Sometimes the family you have by blood isn't the one that deserves you, and it's okay to build your own family with people who value you. What I do know is I'm never going to let anyone treat me like my things, my work, my effort, don't matter again. I spent too many years being walked over by people who were supposed to take care of me, and now that I've finally freed myself, there's no going back. This life on the road isn't perfect, it has its challenges, but it's mine, completely mine, and that makes it worth everything.